Good morning and welcome to Surf All Day A1A. As we move into mid-November, we're seeing a very typical pattern ensue. As the cold fronts sweep down, we get a day or two of offshore wind, usually a decent little wave. Then the wind progressively turns more and more north to east, and then now more like northeast. By tomorrow it'll be full on, as we call it, blowing victory at sea out of the northeast, and the swell will build, and that's time to get on it again. In fact, you could get on it right now, but the surf is something like 1 foot. Yeah, hey Ashley, yeah, thanks for jumping on the stream. Happy to do it. This is part of my morning routine now. Seems like. Okay, so I wanted to tell a true story this morning that happened right out there back in the 90s. And I actually have VHS videotape of we ended up videotaping the news in the evening, the 6 o'clock news, and watched it on the news at noon, local news here. Wendy Chioji reported on it, this event. So I do have video evidence of it, but it almost seems surreal to me now looking back at it. It's practically over 20 years ago is when this occurred. So, okay, here we go. My friend John and I decided to go down for a dawn patrol. It was the summer, and it was during a period of time when there was a lot of Cuban refugee movement, a lot of rafts coming across the Florida Strait, and they were washing up on the beach. So many so that they were being collected and moved to places up in Cape Canaveral, I believe. And I actually encountered one surfing up towards Patrick Air Force Base one evening where a Cuban raft had floated in. No, the refugees or whatever were no longer on the raft, of course. But what happened was it floated really right into the lineup, and a bunch of guys that were out there surfing jumped on it. And at one point, there were just a ton of surfers on this raft, and it made me think, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to be the first person to discover one of these floating in the morning? All right, so that idea lodged in my mind. Fast forward to, maybe a week later, and my friend John and I are out early in the morning, maybe a chest-high day, typical summer pattern, light offshore wind, oil slick glass, a very fishy day. and we're surfing, catching some shore pound, basically high tide conditions, and I noticed all the way out on the horizon, it just looked like a little stick. And you could almost like this, like you could just make out that it was just barely, you had to watch it, that it was even, moving. And I kept checking it out, and I told my friend, I think that could be a boat or a raft or something out there. Really, we kept watching it. Well, we got more and more curious, and being in my early 20s, it seemed perfectly reasonable to just paddle straight out into the ocean. Let's go. What do you say? And we started paddling. So, as you know, if you spend any time around the ocean, your ability to gauge distance in the ocean is off. Good luck, really. The light and everything. Well, so we started paddling and paddling and paddling, and we got about 15 minutes into paddling, I'd say, where we started to think, we're pretty far out. How far do you think it's going to be until we get to that? And, well, let's just keep on going. Kept going. Then we got to the point where another 15 minutes later, we looked back, and we were so far from shore, still again, oil slick glass, and we had gotten into crystal clear water. We had paddled far out enough to get into the really clear water, and the buildings looked really small. Well, at that point, it was really like, the raft is right there. Let's just paddle to it, and then we'll ride it back in. Because at this point, we had gotten ourselves into the predicament I started to now think of all my toothy friends in the gray suits that were most likely well aware of our presence splashing around uh, that far out. I don't know how far out we were. How far out can you get paddling for roughly 20 to 30 minutes? Pretty far. A mile? Yeah, I'd say easily a mile out. But again, oil slick glass, not a bit of current. So we got up to this raft, and it had probably more freeboard than my micro skiff. In some ways, designed in a more sophisticated way. This thing was a double pontoon, rack and pinion, like on a Hobie Cat, where you see those two fins, and they click down into place, and they come. It had that system that had been built out of scrap metal on the back of these two pontoons with a welded frame. It was designed beautifully. In the center of this raft was a metal cup that had been built. And laying down on the raft was a mast, a fiberglass mast that was about 12 feet long, maybe a little longer, with a square rigged mast on it. Now, this is a setup that I know well from sailing as a child on my father's SS Peanut boat, and with my brother on his Hobie Cat, sailing and doing races and stuff on lakes. And so I was like, I know this system, but okay, but before we get to that, at the moment where we get up close enough to observe all of this, I also observe we have friends. We have friends. Or potential enemies out here roaming. That there were baits skittering all over, super twitchy and nervous, and they're big, big creatures below. I don't know, I'm not going to claim they were sharks, but they could have been. They could have been a number of things. A small dolphin, that followed it in, a Dorado, something like that. So, but the point is, it freaked us out. So we decided we had to get in that raft. We climbed up in it, and like I said, I saw all the stuff that was in the raft, and I realized it was a square-rigged sail, big white, looked like a sheet that had been sewn together and formed into the perfect square-rigged sail. And so I stood that thing up into the pole,